The government will listen patiently, even if there are harsh voices.
Deadly clashes between protesters and security forces flared up all across Iran, as demonstrations over rising living costs entered a second week. As of 7th of January, at least 27 people, including security forces, have been killed since protests began with the shopkeepers' strike in Tehran on the 28th of December. Reportedly, demonstrations spread over 220 locations in 27 of Iran's 31 provinces, resulting in more than 990 arrests. Iran's government has weathered wave upon wave of nationwide protests challenging its rule. But for the first time, the country's rulers face a more complex challenge, that of growing domestic unrest and an external military threat. US President Donald Trump has threatened Iran, warning that if Iran violently kills peaceful protesters, the US would intervene.
We're watching it very closely. If they start killing people like they have in the past, I think they're going to get hit very hard by the United States.
So what is driving Iran's protests? How widespread are these protests? How serious is the economic crisis? Can the current protests in Iran be compared with those of 1979? And after Venezuela, can Iran be Trump's next target? We explore these and more on WION Wideangle this week. Across many parts of Iran, demonstrations are currently taking place, especially in rural and semi-urban regions. Widening protests sparked by the Islamic Republic's ailing economy are putting new pressure on the country.
So we all know that it's mostly economic driven, but it's a combination of factors. The build up to that last catalyst and last trigger, which is the sharp fall in the value of the Iranian national currency that we all know about it, but it was an accumulation of anger building up over the past months following the Israeli war back in June. We all remember what happened. And then the reinstatement of the UN sanctions on Iran in September, the so-called snapback mechanism. So those issues exacerbated the Iranian economic crisis.
These protests have also spiraled outside the country. The Iranian diaspora across the UK and Europe is rallying to support protesters in Iran.
What's been really painful these past few years is that it felt like we were shouting into the void and no one was hearing us. And that has to stop. Maybe we need to shout louder, we need to shout better in the right places. In any case, that's the message we need to get across. Come help us, because if you help us, you're actually helping yourselves.
It is really important that we show our solidarity with the people of Iran, because in Iran, regimes try to say, because of the censorship and so on, they try to say that you are alone, you have got no hope. But we are trying to say that no, we are here, we are your voice. And in fact, we are trying to make a bridge between the people inside Iran and outside of Iran. So people like myself, we get the courage from the people of Iran's resistance. And of course, they get courage from seeing that their voice been heard outside.
It's not just the women and the youth anymore that are rising up against the Iranian regime. It's people from all walks of life, including the merchants, who are historically quite conservative and sort of quite pro-regime, really. So I think it's reached a point of no return now.
On the 5th of January, Chief Justice of Iran, Gholam Hosseini Ejei, said authorities would listen to protesters and critics who legitimately and rightly have concerns about their livelihood and social and economic welfare. But he added that they would deal firmly with those who seek to exploit the situation, incite riots and undermine the security of the country and the people. The protests have trembled Iran for over a week. The demonstrations are the biggest in Iran since 2022, when the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini in police custody set off fierce anti-government protests. Amini, a young Kurdish woman, was detained by morality police for allegedly not wearing her hijab properly. More than 550 people were killed and 20,000 detained in a violent crackdown on those protests by security forces. Though the current demonstrations have not reached the size and scope of the 2022 unrest or the 1979 uprising, they have rattled the country and drawn a prompt reaction from the United States and Israel.
But right now, it's all about economy, social freedom, and of course, more freedom for the youth, because recently we had a similar protest in scale back in 2022, but the trigger was different. The protests of Mahsa Amini, those protests, of course, were driven by social freedom ambitions by the youth back then, but no economy was seen in the slogans.
President Trump issued a direct warning to Iranian leaders over the treatment of protesters, saying the U.S. was locked and loaded. Then came the U.S. Special Forces operation targeting Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela, followed by a second warning to Iran. Such direct threats from a sitting U.S. president issued while protests are still ongoing are highly unusual.
As framed by Iranian officials, it is a routine exercise, military exercise, aimed at enhancing the preparedness of the country's armed forces. But of course, the timing is important. It seems to be a muscle flexing aimed at the United States and Israel, because Iran is on high alert since the June war. It has been on a rebuilding mode since then.
In response to Trump's threat, Iran has reportedly installed banners countering the threat to the United States and Israel. The banner, installed near the former Israeli embassy in Tehran, contains graphics showing coffins draped in Israeli and American flags with the text, "Watch out for your soldiers."
The US can't do anything. We don't fear Trump. This has nothing to do with them. It is an internal issue. We don't interfere in their issues. He wants to dictate terms to us from the other side of the world. When it comes to our country, we won't just chat slogans. We will defend ourselves. It's our business if we are content or when we are not. It is our business, not Trump or anybody else's business.
Iran's military story is entirely different from that of Venezuela's. Of course, those two countries are not comparable in many senses, including the military capabilities here in Iran is entirely different from that of Venezuela's. What Iran has, the missiles and the drones, and we all witnessed what happened during the June conflict with Israel. So Iran says that if the United States wants to do such a thing or intervene or interfere in Iran's domestic affairs by quote unquote rescuing the Iranian protesters in the face of the Iranian security forces, then Iran would move to target American soldiers in the region. So there seems to be a regional consequence for any move on the part of the United States to try to intervene in these ongoing protests here.
The protests began peacefully in many parts of Iran on the 28th of December. The dissents are driven by public anger over soaring inflation and the sharp devaluation of the local currency against the US dollar, which now stands at about 80% higher than a year ago. Traders at Tehran's Grand Bazaar were deeply worried. Businesses have been destroyed by the failing rial. Protesters were seen chanting slogans against the collapsing exchange rate, forcing many shopkeepers to shut down. Let's take a look at the official data to understand the severity of the economic situation in Iran. Inflation has reached 42.2% in December, rising from November last year. Food prices have jumped by 72% compared to last year, and medical and healthcare costs rose by 50%. At the same time, Iran's currency has collapsed. The US dollar has reached 1.42 million rials on the open market. However, a year ago it was 820,000 rials.
Given the current forex rates in Iran, the rial, what triggered the protest was actually the rial losing 7% of its value on December 28th. National currency had lost 7% of its value overnight, hitting 1.45 million against a single US dollar. And what that meant, that every Iranian would earn, their monthly salary would equal around $150 a month. $150 a month.
Protests have broken out in at least 27 of Iran's 31 provinces, presenting the largest challenge to Iran's clerical establishment since 2022. Footage from the last few days shows evidence of anti-government gatherings across the country, including in regions that were previously perceived as being highly loyal to the state. But these regions now reverberate with chants that are openly targeting Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Let's take a look at some of these provinces. One of the most violent crackdowns happened in Malekshai, a small town in the western province of Ilam. A demonstration took place at a commandery boulevard in the town, which is where the officers of several state institutions are located. Ilam province is mainly home to the country's Kurdish and Lur ethnic groups and faces severe economic hardship. Human rights groups said 4 people were killed in the incident. Protests in Qom in central Iran and Mashhad in the northeast showed the angst against the regime. Both these have traditionally hosted populations loyal to the Islamic Republic. Iranian protesters chanted pro-monarchy slogans in Qom, which is a core stronghold of Shiite clerics and the Islamic Republic, signaling a major symbolic breach in a city long seen as politically indomitable. In Lordagan, about 470 kilometers south of Tehran, huge crowds of protesters were seen on the streets. Reportedly, 2 people were killed during the protests. Isfahan province is home to an Iranian military airbase. It also hosts Iran's nuclear enrichment facilities near Natanz, making it strategically sensitive. State media reported that a man died during protests in Fuladshar. Reportedly, police opened fire on demonstrators, causing the fatality. A group of Baluch prisoners called on the people of Sistan and Baluchistan province, appealing to residents to reclaim streets that have always belonged to the people, not dictators. Sistan and Balochistan are the only provinces which share their borders with both Afghanistan and Pakistan. Thus, this area is of great geopolitical importance. While President Masoud Pezeshkian has called for restraint and dialogue, Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has urged firm action against the rioters. The first comments by 86-year-old Ayatollah Ali Khamenei came as violence surrounding the demonstrations sparked by Iran's ailing economy killed dozens of people.
A bunch of people incited or hired by the enemy are getting behind the tradesmen and shopkeepers and chanting slogans against Islam, Iran, and the Islamic Republic. This is what matters most. We talk to protesters. The officials must talk to them. But there is no benefit to talking to rioters. Rioters must be put in their place.
Meanwhile, Iran's government said it was listening to the voice of people and was seeking to restore calm after some of the largest protests in the country in 3 years.
I reiterate that listening to the voice of people, even when they protest and when their protests are harsh, is a duty of the government. We will do our best to restore calm through a process of dialogue that has already started and through reforms. The President has ordered that the atmosphere of dialogue be created, and God willing, we will see stability and calm restored to the society and the economy.
The economy in Iran was seriously damaged by American sanctions on oil sales and international banking transactions imposed in 2018 when Trump exited the nuclear deal with Tehran. After the UN Security Council brought back sanctions in September last year, the Iranian currency plunged even further. Rampant corruption and mismanagement have also played a role. Adding to Iran's troubles is the continuing conflict with Israel. On the 13th of June 2025, the Israel-Iran conflict stopped being a shadow war. It turned real. Israel carried out a massive attack in Iran. Codenamed Operation Rising Lion. The operation involved dozens of Israeli fighter jets, targeting the country's nuclear facilities, ballistic missile sites, and the residences of top generals. Israel's surprise attack on Iran set off a 12-day conflict that culminated with the United States bombing and heavily damaging Iran's nuclear facilities. Iran and Israel have been enemies for the past few decades, with Iran saying it wants to wipe Israel off the map and threatening to annihilate it. Israel, for its part, regards Iran as its biggest opponent, but this wasn't always the case. The two nations, now locked in open conflict, were once close allies until Iran's 1979 Islamic Revolution. Iran was one of the first states to recognize Israel after it was founded in 1948. Israel regarded Iran as an ally against the Arab states. Iran welcomed US-backed Israel as a counterweight to the region's Arab countries. At the time of the Cold War, Iran was seeking to modernize its military capabilities, and Israel, with its advanced technological expertise, emerged as an attractive partner. At the time, oil from Iran was critical for Israel's industrial and military needs, as Arab nations had put an oil embargo on the Jewish state. So Israel benefited from Iranian oil to keep its security and industrial machinery running. In return, Israel provided Iran with modern military equipment to fight its war against Iraq in the 1980s. The Iranians even imported advanced missile systems, M40 anti-tank guns, Uzi submachine guns, and aircraft engines from Israel. Then there was Project Flower, which was an Israeli-Iranian venture to develop advanced missile systems jointly. Project Flower, one of 6 oil for arms contracts between Iran and Israel, was conceived and signed during the reign of Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the Shah of Iran, in 1977. The rule of the Shah saw a cordial and symbiotic relationship between the two nations, where each would benefit from the other. Overall, their alliance was built on shared strategic interests, deep military cooperation, and strong economic ties. The collaboration under Project Flower came to an abrupt halt with the Islamic Revolution in 1979, which overthrew the Shah's regime and established an Islamic Republic under Ruhollah Khomeini. After the revolution, autocratic monarchy was replaced by an Islamic republic based on the principle of rule by Islamic jurists, where clerics served as the head of state and in many powerful governmental roles. A rapidly modernizing capitalist economy was replaced by a populist economy and Islamic culture. The leader of the revolution and founder of the Islamic Republic, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khamenei, was Iran's supreme leader until he died in 1989. He was followed by Ali Khamenei, who is currently the supreme leader of Iran. The immediate nationwide uprisings against the new government began with the 1979 Kurdish rebellion, with the Khuzestan uprisings, along with the uprisings in Sistan and Baluchistan province and other areas. Over the next several years, these were violently subdued by the new Islamic government. Fast forward to the years of 2025 and 2026. At present, the demonstrations have taken an anti-state tone, with protesters in numerous locations chanting slogans against Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and the clerical establishment that has been ruling the country since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. People have been seen chanting in support of Reza Pahlavi, the exiled son of the Shah of Iran, and the pre-1979 revolution Pahlavi dynasty. In fact, in the city of Iranshar, in the coastal Sistan and Baluchistan province, protesters set fire to a statue of Khamenei and the leader of the 1979 revolution, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. Well, that's how strongly the people of Iran want to see a change in the way the country is functioning.
Well, let's not compare the 1979 revolution with this one. The scale was different. The reasons and the triggers, the catalysts, everything is different from now. That it is a widespread protest. It's still far from a revolution, but it is a widespread protest. It began as a protest that targeted the Iranian economy. But now it took a different form. We can hear some slogans that are politically charged slogans targeting the establishment itself. But of course, in the scale, it's entirely different from 1979. Back then, it was a revolution.
Iran is now at a critical juncture. Public survival, political stability, and trust in Iran's current government are all under pressure. With rising prices and fatalities already reported, anger in the voices of people on streets is unlikely to fade anytime soon. The big question remains: what lies ahead for the current regime?